We all know that one of the barriers to feeding our babies breast milk is lack of access to care. And what I would love to do to try to close that gap is have a third type of podcast episode where I provide lactation consulting for clients who don't have access to lactation consultants. Either they don't have insurance or their insurance does not cover lactation consulting for whatever reason. So if you are in this position, or you know somebody who is, and you would love to do a consult with me, and you don't mind being recorded, both your voice and video, and have it aired on the podcast, reach out to me so that both you and the people listening can benefit from that consult. Do you worry about weight loss during the postpartum period, and particularly while you are breastfeeding? I have been seeing a lot of questions about this in various breastfeeding specific groups. And in a world where we cannot get away from talk about weight loss, I get it. So I'm going to try to navigate these waters as carefully as I can and try to do it in a way that is not triggering to anybody who has struggled to be okay in their own skin and who misses their old body pre-children and who has just wondered what the research is about this, while also honoring what I believe is the true heart of the matter here. So if you're wondering what that is, let's get into it. Have you ever stopped to consider why so many humans struggle to feed human milk to their human babies in recent history? Have you then looked around and noticed that so few animals in the animal kingdom struggle to do the same? My name is Lo Nigrash. I am an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC, and a childbirth educator, and I have been thinking about this for a long time. Come uncover the barriers that make feeding our babies so difficult through conversations with people who have breastfed and pumped, through evidence-based information around breastfeeding and pumping and human milk making, and through conversations with other experts in the field. So that one podcast episode at a time, we chip away at these barriers and make breastfeeding easier for everyone. Okay, so in a world where women have historically been expected to have babies without complaint and then bounce back into our size whatever dresses and be able to cook and clean as we did and be as chipper as we were and do all the things we were able to do. And in a world where now we are expected to have and do it all, it is no surprise that so many of us long to look as if we have not had babies when we have. And I see all the time on various postpartum groups or mothering specific groups or breastfeeding specific groups, people asking about losing weight while breastfeeding. Does it really help you lose weight? And then other people jumping on to say, oh, yes, I lost so much weight while breastfeeding. Or, oh man, I haven't been able to lose any weight, but I've heard that you retain the weight while breastfeeding. And it then just becomes another area of confusion for so many people. And this is understandable because whether or not we are able to lose weight is very individual. And so just like when I talk about your baby's weight gain and how your baby is an individual, and so when we look at studies about milk intake and how much they'll take in any individual session, it is the same with weight loss. When we look at studies, we are looking at averages. And one study might have 24 women in it, and another study might have 20,000 women in it. But whichever the case is, these studies are looking at averages. And you are not an average. And your body is not an average. And we cannot expect your body to act like the average of all those other people. We can expect your body to act how your body has acted in the past. And weight loss and food and human milk production, lactation, is complicated. And even postpartum recovery is complicated. There are studies that I was going down a rabbit hole as I was looking at the research and the studies that go into this. And you see your prenatal provider at 6 weeks postpartum, you get your check to say, okay, you are cleared for physical activity. But yet, postpartum recovery is way more complicated than that. There are hormonal shifts that are still happening. There are physical changes that have happened to your body, both internally in the vaginal canal and in the uterus that are still healing up. There are psychological changes that have happened, and your body, when it gains weight in the prenatal period, it is not just gaining the weight of the baby and the weight of the increased size of the uterus. It is gaining weight from increased blood flow and from the additional organ of the placenta and from increased water flow and from increased fluids to various parts of your body, and increased fat stores, which are used to provide nutrition to the baby. So it is way more complicated than just saying, create a baby that is between 5 and 10 pounds, and then lose that 5 and 10 pounds when you give birth, plus the weight of the placenta, a few pounds more, and it's gone. That is just not how pregnancy works. You've heard me now for a few months talking about how much I've enjoyed getting home cooked meals delivered right to my front door from feastandfettle.com. And I'm here today to tell you that if you know somebody who is in the postpartum period, who you would like to provide true support to, that you should go to feastandfettle.com and order home-cooked meals to be delivered right to their front door. One of the biggest barriers to breastfeeding success is a lack of support. A new parent is feeding a baby up to 15 times a day. How on earth do we expect that person to feed that baby that many times, also feed themselves, and provide meals to other members of their family? There's not enough time. You know how hard it is as a busy parent yourself to try to put meals on the table. Go to feastandfettle.com, use my code MILK, M-I-L-K, coordinate which meals they would like to have delivered, and send them a week's worth of delicious meals and be the person who eases the burden for them. What a gift. I can't think of a better way to support somebody in the postpartum period. We have this expectation that if we bounce back and get really active and start exercising and start doing all the things that we did before the pregnancy, that then our bodies will adjust and the weight will shed. And actually, our bodies need some time to rest and recover. And for many of us, that is not a possibility. Whether we go back into paid work or we go back into unpaid work where we are caring for our children and our homes. Not to mention all the time that is required to actually sit and feed the baby, whether that is feeding the baby from our bodies or feeding the baby with a bottle. That takes a lot of time, in addition to the time that is required to clean up after feeding that baby. And babies need just a lot of attention. They need to be cuddled. They need to be snuggled. They need to be held closely. They need help falling asleep. That is part of their needs of being a young human on the earth. And so that takes a lot of time from us. And when we have these societal expectations that we should be moving and active and expending a lot of calories, it makes it hard for us to settle into this slow time of recovery and connection with our infant. So, what does the data say about weight loss in the postpartum period? It's mixed. Essentially, the data is mixed. So, there have been a lot of studies. I think it's funny that there have been so many studies on women's bodies and weight loss in the postpartum period and breastfeeding, yet not as many studies on how we reduce pain in breastfeeding or how we change the perceptions or educate providers about feeding human milk to human babies, for instance. Because societally, we want women to get back to the standards of beauty that we have set forth in the Western world. So, the studies that exist when it comes to weight loss basically say that women who exclusively breastfeed do, on average, lose more weight than women who do not breastfeed or who do mixed feeding. But there is some acknowledgement that there are social determinants which we cannot account for, which may rule out whether or not it is breastfeeding, which is the thing that is leading to weight loss. Were those people genetically predisposed to weight loss to begin with because of their access to healthy food, because of their access to great medical care, because of their access to being able to work out? They lived in safer neighborhoods so they can be active, or they have the finances to go to a gym. Like, there are social determinants that cannot be accounted for because we can't really do a blind study where we say you are going to breastfeed, you are not going to breastfeed, because that is unethical. And so we just have to look and see when we do these studies who's breastfeeding, who's not breastfeeding, and then account for it that way. We do know that those who exclusively nurse for 3 to 6 months lose more weight than those who exclusively nurse for a shorter time. or those that mixed feed. But it's hard to know if it's really the nursing that is accounting for that. And we do sometimes see that those who are exclusively nursing are gaining weight or are not losing weight. But I would like to point out here that sometimes what can happen is that parents who had disordered eating before pregnancy are sometimes able to abandon that disordered eating during pregnancy because they know their body is supposed to grow. And the way that their body is growing is different. The shape is considered beautiful. They feel beautiful during pregnancy. And so that disordered eating kind of gets pushed away. But then after the baby is born, that disordered eating comes back full force and it becomes a tug of war between what the parent knows is healthy for the baby and what they would like to do to feel good in their own skin, based again on this societal pressure to look a certain way. The other interesting thing is that there have been studies done on people with disordered eating, and these are diagnosed disorders, but I think many of us have a lot of disordered eating behaviors because we just grew up in this diet culture. But these are diagnosed eating disorders. And there was an observational longitudinal study that followed 99 mothers from pregnancy through 1 year after birth. There were 46 that were the healthy controls. They had no diagnosed disorders. 38 had current eating disorders, and 25 had a history of eating disorders. And the researchers discovered that the mothers with a current or past eating disorder were more likely to express concern about their children overeating and becoming overweight, meaning they were passing on their fear about their own bodies to their children. They were also less aware than the healthy controls of their child's signs of hunger and fullness. And then their approaches to nursing were very different. It's something that I'm going to figure out how I can, with as much sensitivity as possible, incorporate into my own practice. Because it said 10 of the 13 mothers in the eating disorder group who nursed their babies fed them on a rigid schedule, whereas only 2 of the 18 mothers in the healthy control group nursed by the clock. The researchers noted, and I'm reading this from Nancy Moorbacher's book, Breastfeeding Answers, a Guide for Helping Families. The researchers noted that using a rigid feeding schedule, which was recommended by healthcare providers, which often is, led to confusion and anxiety in the mothers with an eating disorder. When the babies showed hunger cues outside the recommended feeding times, some expressed guilt because they interrupted their baby's behavior because they interpreted their baby's behavior as signs of an infant eating disorder that arose from their own conflicts with food or as signs of their own inability to meet their child's needs. The mothers in the eating disorder group were 4 times more likely to rate their baby as a fussy eater compared with the controls. So this idea that we need to lose weight quickly and look as if we have never given birth when we have, and some of us multiple times, is impacting, for some of us, the way we feed our babies. And I am not going to lie and pretend like this does not impact me as well, because it does. I have these struggles every single day. My kids are 6 and almost 10, and I still struggle with how I balance healthy eating for myself, healthy eating for them, a good relationship with food, helping them recognize their hunger signals, helping them to see food as something that is both fun and something that fuels our body and a way that we connect with other people. And I don't always get it right for myself or for them, but I know that I am determined to continue to learn how I do this. And as a lactation consultant, when someone comes to me and says, "How do I lose weight while breastfeeding?" I have an obligation to give them evidence-based information about what they can do without imposing guilt and shame on them for wanting to do this, because we are all in different places when it comes to our comfortability with our own bodies and being okay with the shape of our bodies, the shape and size of our bodies. And there is a lot of conflicting information out there, and most of the information out there, even from healthcare providers and scientists, is saying we should all be losing weight. Of course, I am not going to say to clients who come to me and say, "Oh, how can I lose weight while breastfeeding?" I'm not going to say you shouldn't, because that's not up to me to tell them whether or not they should or should not lose weight. What I will say to them is that it's okay to go slowly. It's okay to feel frustrated if it doesn't happen as quickly as you want. Here are the resources that I have clung on to, like a podcast called Food We Need to Talk, which comes out of WBUR, Boston Public Radio, which I think is a fantastic podcast. And it has helped me understand my relationship to food and using food as a weight loss tool. And also I give them the evidence, which is that nursing parents can choose nutrient-dense foods that are high in nutrients, low in added sugars, that they can try to increase their exercise as long as that has been approved by their healthcare providers, that anything that is weight bearing is really good. So lifting weights is really great, and that they can do any sort of movement which makes them feel good, because it's more likely that they will continue to do that, that some movement is better than no movement. So setting goals that are achievable is good. And that they can start by reducing 100 calories a day if they are looking for reduction. But to do that while recognizing that they are also feeding another human being with their body. And that there is a lot going on inside their bodies hormonally, and that they have permission to take it slowly, and that as they are working to change their body, I also encourage them to find appreciation for the body that they currently have, to find clothes that fit them well, and that it's okay for them to love the body they have as they work towards the body that they want. There's no need to punish themselves for having the body that they have, because they did a lot of hard work to create a human. And right now they're doing a lot of hard work to provide human milk for that human. And we forget that. That is no small feat, and it takes a lot of work to do it. It requires sleep deprivation. It is hard on the body. And it is important for people to recognize this, and to recognize this in themselves, and to all give ourselves a little breathing room and a little break, and to know that we will not always be chasing after tiny humans, and that we will have more time for ourselves, more time to go on hikes, more time to go to yoga classes, more time to go to the gym, more time to go swimming, more time to do the things that we love to do when we did not have children, and even more time to cook, and more flexibility to cook the things that we really love as our children grow older. And as I close out, I just would like to remind you that if you would love to start now with healthy foods that you do not have to prepare yourself, but that someone else has cooked for you, and you get to select from a menu of options, try out Feast and Fettle. You can go to feastandfettle.com. Their food is delicious. There are choices that everybody will love in your family. Or if you just want to get food for you and your partner so that you can still serve your children the easy food that's in the freezer, then do that. And you can use my code MILK, MILK, for $30 off your first order of home-cooked meals delivered right to your door. And this is if you live in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and now in Maine. Try it out and let me know what you think. Bye.